Hey, so I was just sort of curious. Being a trader and sort of following that whole the carbon credit story for a while before Mark Moss, connected us with you.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, like KRBN and all that. They had a nice run. They left a trend line pretty sharply for a while, and now it's significantly down. The streaming company and KRBN and the futures have not had quite the sell off, but it's had significant one. What what is your take on that?
Yeah. So first, I'll preface it by saying I'm catching up because I was over in Africa last month. I ended up getting COVID and was stuck in Africa a little longer than I thought I'd be. Um, if you haven't had it yet, that stuff it is no joke. Still, I,
Mm-hmm.
it was a butt kicking. Anyway, so I'm getting back to things. The sell off that I've seen with you're talking about the two Crane Shares ETFs
Yeah.
first and foremost,
Well, there's
right?
one crane share ETF and one which is the Carbon Streaming Corp.
Yeah, the
and
voluntary market.
and then
So,
and then at the same time I'm watching the nature-based global offset futures, and
yep,
it peaked up around 16, and we're down to about 12 and a quarter now. It looks like there's a gap to fill, but there's so little volume. I don't know if it fills gaps like it does on other commodities.
yeah. So the the Crane Shares ones and a lot of the publicly available data, or a lot of those products, um, they're most heavily exposed to the EU emissions trading system, and there was a huge sell-off there because of fears that in the EU regulated market that the ETS might take a backseat to figuring out what the heck to do about Ukraine and the threat of Russia possibly invading another area.
Right.
So that was why there. Now I've tended to see the voluntary market products also be loosely correlated with the EU ETS movements. It's why honestly, like, we used to get a whole bunch of questions like, "No, I see the EUAs are $90. Why isn't voluntary carbon $90?" It's like the the broader market has tended to basket them a little bit.
Yeah.
So I would expect to see voluntary emissions reduction credits take a little bit of that heat. What is NGO at right now? It's like 12 and a quarter, you said?
Yeah. I think it closed at, yeah, 12 and a quarter.
Yeah, so I was catching up with a much more active carbon trader yesterday, and she had said her interpretation was, there was a big run up in the short term spot prices, and generally you see that spread out to farther out contracts to reduce their exposure there. Now, I would also say there were a couple of large issuances that happened, excuse me, that I think even things out a bit as well. But I agree, just looking at NGO, the volumes are too low to really make like a great determination. And that's part of why I don't like to rely just on NGO. I'll forward you the pricing report from yesterday that gives us a little bit more of a picture of the whole market. There
Okay.
you go.
There's a lot going on, with regards to, well, first, we had the downturn in the general markets, with regards to inflationary pressures and potential interest rate rises, and then you add, Russia and Ukraine to it, a month later, and so it's sort of dragging everything down except for your gold and Bitcoin pops and some of that type of value commodities.
Wasn't that funny? Wasn't that funny to see Bitcoin swing back up?
Yeah,
Um, I
yeah,
mean, I think a lot of it is, I don't, hard for me to say how much of that was conflict related. You had people buying it at like a $20,000-$30,000 premium over in Russia. I don't know if
yeah.
you
And
saw
I
any of
hadn't
that.
really heard much about what kind of premiums were being purchased, but I can tell you that it's just more and more advertising for a decentralized, censor-proof, government not controlled asset. It's just more free advertising, just like Mark says on what Canada was doing. Just let's advertise, a different type of currency than Ukraine and Russia, and so anyway,